I thought I'd do a video today comparing bare knuckle pugilism back in the 18th and 19th centuries, or in other words, 1700s and 1800s style boxing, which was bare fisted, bare knuckle. Totally different to what it is today. And in them days, boxers used to go unlimited rounds, and there was no weight classes either. So that shows you how different it is already. And the style in which they used to fight is different to what it is now. Now, if you notice, obviously this is a drawing, but if you notice the way the stance and the way the fists are, no boxer poses like that today. And there's a reason for that, right? In the bare knuckle era of the 18th and 19th centuries, boxers used to have the guard low because they were protecting body shots, primarily body shots. Not head. Obviously, there were head shots. You know, every boxer head hunts, though they booked. It was mostly they were mostly protecting the body, because that's what bare knuckle boxers used to aim for: the body, then the head. Modern day boxing is head hunting, head hunting, head hunting. This picture here is from 1908. Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion of the world, beat Tommy Burns in Rushcutters Bay, Sydney, Australia. Now, this fight was gloves, and I think it was scheduled for like 30 rounds, 35 rounds or something like that, 35 3-minute rounds. Now, even this is different to modern day boxing, because back then gloves were 5 ounces, not 10 ounces, and obviously the rounds were a lot more. No gum shield, they didn't wear gum shields then, and no mutual corner rule. That didn't come in until the late 1920s, I think. So there's no neutral corner rule. When someone got knocked down, you could stand around them, and then as soon as they got up, you can hit them again. Like today, it's different. You have to go to your neutral corner, referee's 10 count. Back then it was different. This is an image of Mike Tyson versus Frank Bruno, 1989. I think it was a 1989 fight anyway. They fought in 96 as well, but I think this is the 89 one, I think. I'm not too sure actually. Actually, it might be the 96 one actually. Yeah, I think it's 1996 from this picture. But anyway, yeah. Like boxers today, modern day boxers are different to bare knuckle boxers, because when you have 10 ounce gloves on and hand wraps on, you can hit as hard as you can to the head. If you hit someone's forehead wearing boxing gloves and hand wraps, you can hit as hard as you can and you might not break your hand. I mean, boxers do still break their hands from time to time, but you can hit harder to the face, especially to the head, with gloves on. In the bare knuckle boxers, even modern day bare knuckle boxers, you can't really do that, because you could break your hand hitting someone's head bare knuckle. So going back to the bare knuckle era, a lot of people think it was savage, it was brutal, which it was. I'm not saying it wasn't. Just think, going bare knuckle boxing, unlimited rounds. Sometimes it wasn't even in a ring, it was like just around a crowd full of people on concrete or grass or dirt or whatever. It was different, you know. This is John L. Sullivan, the first. He's labelled the first heavyweight champion of modern boxing, which I'm a bit confused, because yeah, he was the last bare knuckle champion, but was he the first glove champion? Because most of his famous fights were bare knuckle, and he won his last bare knuckle fight in 1889 before his next title fight was glove one, which he lost to James J. Corbett in 1892. That was a Marquis of Queensberry rules, which is modern boxing. I mean, he did influence the transition. He influenced it, definitely. But was he the first champion of glove boxing? I doubt it. But well, I wasn't there. So, but from what I've read, from what I've researched, he was the last bare knuckle London prize ring rules boxer. Not really the first gloved one. The first gloved heavyweight champion of modern boxing. I say that's James J. Corbett. This is Jake Coleraine. He fought John L. Sullivan, the last guy you saw in the picture, in 1889, which lasted 75 rounds. Not 75 3-minute rounds, 75 rounds, which means in them days, when somebody was knocked to the ground, the round was finished and it restarts. So a round was only over until somebody fell. So that means if you could be stood up for 10, 20 minutes boxing, that round's not finished until somebody's knocked down, like legit locked down. So that's how different it was. And like I said before, there weren't headhunters. If you look at the way he stands, you won't see no peekaboo style back then. Even though later on, when the transition to gloves, that's when all the styles were kind of perfected. Even in bare knuckle era, they did do some styles that are around today. You know, even high guard, but it was mainly this type of guard, protecting the body, then protecting the face. Yeah, like all these styles you see today of boxers, like Mike Tyson style, his teacher Gus D. Mato, and the Mayweathers with the Philly shell. They didn't invent the Philly shell. That was on the peekaboo that existed back in these days. See, the old style boxers. I mean, I've seen some footage of boxers. The earliest possible footage is like back in the late 1890s, early 1900s, and I've seen. And this is only about 10 years after the bare knuckle era finished. And the way they fought back then is how boxers fight today. So the bare knuckle boxers did have scientific approaches, like using, it wasn't called Philly shell back then, it was called the turn or crouch. It was more of a crouch style, which is similar, very, very similar to the Philly shell style. And also there was the peekaboo style, which wasn't called that then. It was just high guard and bob and weave. That's all it was. And it's just been perfected over the years and they renamed by different coaches. So these boxers today, if you had to put these boxers in the bare knuckle era of the 18th and 19th centuries, it'd be totally different for them, totally different sport. You won't recognise it. Because back in the early days of the 18th century, right, eye gouging was allowed, biting was allowed, and almost like a violent version of MMA, bare-fisted. It was totally different. And back in them days, even up until John Sullivan era in the 1880s, they could drink whiskey in between rounds to ease pain. Totally different to what it is now. And they used to go round after round after round, unlimited, right? Even when it transitioned to 3-minute rounds, when it went from unlimited to 3-minute rounds in the 1890s, fights were still scheduled for like 60, 70 plus rounds, 80 plus rounds in some cases. So it was different back then. Boxers had a different approach, because you see boxers today that can't even last 4, 5, 6 rounds to get gassed out, you know. So you think, how did they do it back then? And there was no drugs and no steroids and no PEDs back then. So how did they do it? They did it by a different approach. It wasn't just headhunting and trying to take the person's head off. That's not what it was. It was more body shots and they were more tactical about it. Now it's different. So yeah, I just thought I'd just talk about boxing, and because I'm quite bored, so I thought, no, I'll just do a video about bare knuckle boxing and modern boxing, the differences, how boxers back then coped with the long duration, and how boxers today cope with their duration, and the tactical approach, and the differences between bare knuckle and modern boxing. Yeah, just a bit of interest there, because not everybody is aware of the differences. I mean, I'm a boxing historian, so I've researched a lot of historical boxing fights and strategies and all that. Yeah, I'm just telling you the differences.